academic studies make more sense and are easier to remember if you make connections between different topics. Now I'm going to make a connection between two apparently disparate topics, utilitarianism and theodicy. And the connection they have between them is they both have a problem with justice. And they both have a problem with justice because they both argue by a kind of cost-benefit analysis. So if you think about utilitarianism, you will remember, is the doctrine that an action is good if it increases the total amount of pleasure in the world or decreases the total amount of pain. And what we should be trying to do would be to try to maximise the amount of pleasure overall and minimise the amount of pain overall. And the problem with this is that it doesn't pay attention to who has the pleasures and who has the pains. There can be deserved pains, punishments, just punishments, and there can be sordid pleasures or undeserved pleasures, right? So the pleasure of seeing somebody harmed or executed. Public executions were very popular when they happened, so we have to assume that people enjoyed them.
Now behold the awful price of treason!
So you can imagine there might be somebody who's very unpopular, but not guilty of any crime, but they're so unpopular that if they were executed in public, perhaps in front of a TV audience of billions, the little bits of pleasure that all those TV viewers gain by watching the public execution might massively outweigh the pain and grief of the person who's being executed, the innocent person who's being executed, and their friends and family who are distressed at their loss. This, of course, would be unjust. This person we're imagining hasn't done anything to deserve to be executed. But utilitarianism struggles to explain why it would be wrong to do that. Because if the numbers come out that way round, if there's more pleasure than pain from this action, then it looks like utilitarianism requires us to do it, which is a very strange ethical result. And that's a standard problem with utilitarianism, right? That ethicists know about that for a long time. There's a very similar point you can make with theodicy. Remember that theodicy is the attempt to explain why a good, all-powerful and all-knowing God would allow apparently pointless suffering to happen in the world. You think of Stephen Fry when asked, what would you say to God? He said,
bone cancer in children? What's that about? Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why?
There are children who are born with terrible diseases, who live short and painful lives, who can't possibly be guilty of anything because they're too young to have committed any sins. And, so how does that make sense? Theodicy is where you say, yes, but there are greater goods. The possibility of free will. It's a good thing that human beings have free will, but the trouble with free will is, of course, that people will use it badly. People will sometimes, if it's genuinely free, will use it to inflict pain on others. But that's a cost worth paying. But, that's moral evil. But what about natural evil, right? What about natural pain? Well, there must be moral challenge. The world should be a veil of soul-making. It must be the kind of universe where we can become worthy of the companionship of God, right? That's the sort of answer that theodicy gives to explain why the world is the way it is. And the thing to notice about this is that the benefits of living in a world where there can be pain and loss only accrue to human beings. On standard theology, it's only human beings who get to exercise free will. It's only human beings who have their souls made by living in a world like this one. It's only human beings who are capable of growing through moral challenge. It's only human beings who are capable of becoming worthy of the companionship of God. That's normally how theology works. But this is wildly unjust to animals. Animals suffer pain. right? They can also suffer loss. Animals that form loving relationships with each other can experience grief and loss when one of their companions dies. So animals suffer, and what's more, animals have been suffering for millions of years. There were animals capable of experiencing pain and loss long millions of years before human beings evolved. So if we can speak on their behalf, this is massively unjust that dinosaurs, for example, which we should think were capable of experiencing pain, what are we to say to the dinosaurs? That they had to experience pain and possibly loss in order that some other species, which would not evolve until millions of years after the dinosaurs died out, should be able to live in a world where we can grow through moral challenge and become worthy of the companionship of God. That's just not fair to the dinosaurs. Now, you may think that there are replies available to defenders of theodicy, and you may be right. The question I want to suggest to you now is that if you think there is something that can be said in reply to this point by defenders of theodicy, will it work for utilitarianism? Because the point I want to make here is that it's the same criticism, essentially, for both theodicy and utilitarianism. So if there's a defence that works for theodicy, perhaps it can be adapted to work for utilitarianism. Or the other way around, right? I mean, utilitarians have made attempts to defend utilitarianism against the criticism of injustice, or maybe some defensive manoeuvre by utilitarians can be carried across and used to rescue theodicy from this criticism, right? So by noticing patterns, common patterns between different areas of philosophy, you can generate new questions and possibly gain new insights by carrying the same thought from one area to another.